English Podcast Official, hosted by Raam
And Sia.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the English Podcast Official. My name is Raam.
And I'm Sia. We're so glad you could join us for another conversation.
Sia, I was reading the news headlines this morning, as I'm sure many of our listeners do, and I saw some headlines about the recent escalation between two regional powers, Iran and Israel. It's often described by analysts as a shadow war or a proxy war.
Those terms themselves sound so unsettling. A war fought in the shadows.
It means the conflict was indirect. It was often carried out through allied groups in other countries or through covert operations, cyber attacks, and assassinations.
So it's a long-running conflict, but one where the main actors rarely, if ever, attacked each other directly on their own soil.
Exactly. And that is the key piece of context, because in April of this year, that long-standing rule changed.
So what was that first event? What broke the pattern?
On April 1st, there was an airstrike on a building right next to the Iranian embassy, or consulate, in Damascus, the capital of Syria.
And this consulate building was considered Iranian territory?
Yes, under international law, diplomatic missions like embassies and consulates are generally considered sovereign territory of the country they represent.
So an attack on a consulate is seen as an attack on the country itself.
Precisely. The strike killed several people, including two high-ranking Iranian generals, and Iran publicly blamed Israel for the attack.
I can only imagine the anger and the pressure to respond after an event like that. It feels like a line was crossed.
And that feeling led directly to the next major event. Iran promised there would be retaliation.
And the world was watching, wondering what that retaliation would look like, wondering if it would lead to a full-scale war.
It did. On April 13th, Iran launched its first ever direct military attack on Israeli territory.
What did that attack involve?
It was a large-scale attack. Reports say it involved over 300 munitions, including cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and a large number of drones.
That number is hard to even imagine. The sky must have been filled. The feeling on the ground must have been terrifying.
It must have been. But, according to reports from Israel and its allies, the vast majority of those missiles and drones, around 99%, were intercepted.
Intercepted? Meaning they were shot down before they could hit their targets?
Yes, by Israel's own air defense systems, like the Iron Dome, and with significant help from its international partners, including the US, UK, and Jordan.
So even though the physical damage was limited, the psychological impact must have been huge. It was a direct, visible attack. The shadow war was over.
It was an unprecedented moment. That was the word many news outlets used. And then the question shifted again.
The question became, how will Israel respond to this direct attack?
Exactly. The world was again holding its breath, worried that a powerful Israeli counterstrike could trigger an even bigger response from Iran.
It sounds like a dangerous cycle, a spiral of action and reaction.
It is. Then, on April 19th, reports emerged of explosions near a major airbase in Isfahan, a city in Iran.
So Israel did respond? Was it a large-scale attack like Iran's?
It seems not. The response was described by military analysts as being very limited and carefully calibrated.
Calibrated, meaning it was designed to be a specific type of message?
That's the analysis, yes. It appeared to be a message to show that Israel could penetrate Iranian air defenses and strike sensitive sites, but that it was choosing not to escalate to a full-blown war at that moment.
It's a strange and frightening way to communicate, using explosions and military strikes as sentences in a conversation.
It's the language of strategic conflict. And after that limited strike, the immediate crisis seemed to cool down.
And what was happening in the rest of the world during all of this? Were other countries involved?
Yes, that's a crucial part of the story. Behind the scenes, there was intense diplomatic activity.
To try and stop the cycle from continuing.
Exactly. Countries like the United States and many European nations were in constant communication with both sides, urging restraint.
Restraint. That's another one of those words that carries so much weight in these situations. It means holding back your power.
The key goal of this diplomacy was de-escalation. It's the opposite of escalation.
To bring the situation down from a high level of tension to a lower, more stable level. To walk back from the edge.
It involved phone calls between world leaders, public statements calling for calm, and likely some private security assurances as well.
It feels like a moment where the whole world is a concerned neighbor asking two other neighbors to please lower their voices and step back inside.
And for the moment, that international pressure, combined with the strategic calculations of both Israel and Iran, seemed to work. A full-scale war was averted.
But the tension, the underlying conflict, it's still there.
It is, which brings us to a really important idea in international relations, the concept of deterrence.
What does that mean exactly? It sounds like a word a strategist would use.
Deterrence is the idea of preventing an attack by showing your enemy that the cost of that attack will be too high.
So it's like putting a very strong lock on your door to convince a burglar that it's not worth the effort to try and break in.
That's a perfect analogy. It's about creating a credible threat of retaliation to discourage an initial attack.
So, in a way, both Iran's large-scale missile launch and Israel's precise counterstrike were attempts to establish a new kind of deterrence.
That's how many experts see it. Each side was trying to set new rules. Iran was saying, we will now respond directly. And Israel was saying, and so will we, and we can reach you.
But it feels so risky. It's a balance that relies on both sides understanding the other's message perfectly.
It's incredibly risky. A miscalculation or a misunderstanding could lead to that cycle of escalation everyone wants to avoid.
This has been such a clear explanation, Raam, and it highlights how important it is to understand the specific English used in these global conversations.
I agree. Knowing these words helps us decode the news for ourselves. And there is no one better to help us with that than our language strategist, Maruti.
Welcome, Maruti.
Thank you, Raam and Sia. Hello, listeners. When we read the news, words are the tools we use to build understanding. Let's analyze 10 key terms from today's discussion. Escalation, meaning the process of a conflict becoming more serious or intense. Example, diplomats worked hard to prevent a further escalation of the conflict. Retaliation, meaning action taken in return for an injury or offense. Revenge. Example: the country promised swift retaliation after the attack. Proxy war, meaning a war instigated by a major power which does not itself become involved. Example: the two nations have been engaged in a proxy war for years. Deterrence, meaning the action of discouraging an action or event through instilling doubt or fear of the consequences. Example: a strong military can be a form of deterrence. Sovereignty, meaning the authority of a state to govern itself or another state. Example: the attack was seen as a violation of their national sovereignty. Interception, meaning the action of stopping or catching something or someone that is in transit. Example: the air defense system is designed for the interception of missiles. De-escalation, meaning the reduction of the intensity of a conflict or a tense situation. Example: the primary goal of the phone call was de-escalation. Geopolitical, meaning relating to politics, especially international relations, as influenced by geographical factors. Example: the events have significant geopolitical consequences. Consulate, meaning the building in which a consul's duties are carried out, a form of diplomatic office. Example: the airstrike occurred near the nation's consulate in Damascus. Unprecedented, meaning never done or known before. Example: analysts called the direct attack an unprecedented move. Understanding this vocabulary is the first step to understanding the world events that shape our lives. Now, back to you.
Thank you, Maruti. Decoding that language is so empowering. It takes away some of the confusion.
It does. And before we finish today, we want to leave you with a final thought for your own reflection.
When we consume this kind of serious news, it's important to also check in with ourselves to stay grounded. So our reflection prompt for you today is, when you read complex global news, what is one small thing you do to stay informed without feeling overwhelmed?
Perhaps it's limiting your news time to 15 minutes, or discussing it with a friend, or simply taking a few deep breaths after you close the app. There is no wrong answer.
Uplifting, thoughtful, closing music begins to fade in softly.
So today, we saw how a long-standing shadow war can quickly break into the open, and how the international community works to de-escalate tensions.
And we saw that behind the headlines are complex strategic calculations, where actions are used as a form of communication.
It's a reminder that understanding our world is a continuous process. It requires us to listen carefully and think critically.
It reminds me of a room full of incredibly fragile glass sculptures. For years, everyone has known not to run or shout, to walk carefully.
But recently, someone knocked one over.
Exactly. And for a moment, it felt like the vibration might shatter everything. But now, people are walking carefully again, reminding each other to be gentle. The sculptures are still there, the fragility is real, but there is also a deep, shared desire to keep the peace.
May we all continue to walk carefully. Thank you for joining us for this important conversation on the English Podcast Official.
Until next time, stay informed, stay thoughtful, and be kind to yourself.